We're live.
You're now live.
Brilliant.
Good news.
Welcome. So welcome everyone to this evening's FBS Chat. We have Pau Jackson with us. Really pleased to welcome you, Paul. Thank you for joining us. And Guy, who's co-hosting with me. So brilliant. Thank you for joining us as well, Guy, and giving us your time. Am I echoing? Because I can hear it in. Right, let me try. Sorry, guys. Is that better? Is that a little bit better without the earphones? Yes.
Yes.
Cool. So yeah, Paul. Always fascinated to know how people came across the solution focused approach initially.
Well, for me, I'm echoing as well now.
Joe, put it back on.
Is it? Oh God.
Sorry.
Okay.
I heard about Solution Focus from Mark McCurgo and Jenny Clark, and I was doing a lot of work with Mark at the time as trainers, and we'd talk about all sorts of things. And once we'd exhausted football and comedy, we got onto more serious matters, and he mentioned Solution Focus. I don't remember the exact first time or what happened, but I went along to the Bristol Solutions group, which had people like Harry Norman and Kate, can't remember her surname. It was a long time ago. There were about 5 or 6 people who would regularly meet in Bristol around Mark and Jenny's table mostly, and started to get interested in the ideas, reading the books. Then I attended a 4-day brief therapy practice course with Harvey Ratner, and just found the ideas completely amenable and exciting. It seemed like a set of very useful tools, and it was also a comprehensive approach to change. It seems with Solution Focus, you didn't actually need much else. So I really loved the simplicity and completeness and practicality of it. And Mark and I started putting on events. We did a corporate event called The Quest for What Works.
Wow. With
a treasure map. And you had to collect resources in a bag that we provided as you went round the route that gave you ideas and insights into what you wanted to accomplish and how you might go about it. And I've been working with it ever since.
Wow. So when you met with Mark, were you in the helping profession, or was it what were you doing before that?
I was in a very unhelping profession. I started out as a journalist.
Oh.
So that had curiosity, ask people questions, pay attention to the answers, and then use the answers to write articles. I wrote for a newspaper. And then I was a comedy producer at the BBC, which was fun.
Yeah, sounds it. Wow.
So can I come in now and just...
Yeah, of course you can. Anytime you like.
Pick up on that. First to say, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks very much to Joe and Aisha for the invitation. I'm honoured to be with Paul. Paul jointly ran the second best training course I've ever attended. Yeah. Well, the second most important training course in my own career. This was with Mark McCurgo, a course on accelerated learning. It was either 2003 or 2004. The second best after my first 4-day course in solution focused brief therapy, I hasten to add, with Chris. Brief. Yeah. But very important course for me as a trainer. So pleased to be here, Paul. So you were working as a BBC comedy producer at the point at which you met Mark and attended Bristol Solutions Group. And then what was it about your work situation that sort of lent itself, or that connected with your attraction to this approach?
I left the BBC as a full-time employee, where I'd worked for 4 years in Manchester, where I was making programs for Radio 4 and Radio 2, the World Service, and others, and was working as a freelance comedy producer, and I'd moved to Bath. And the connection was that while working in comedy, I'd got very interested in improvisation and had started teaching improvisation to the public as a set of life skills, being more present, more alert in the moment, more creative, and so forth. Lots of skills that you can get by practicing improvisation, which I previously taught to people who were in theatre and radio. And Mark McCogo came on one of my public courses in Bath or Bristol and made himself known to me. And bizarrely, he said he came because he recognised my name from the radio, Pau Z Jackson. And nobody remembers anyone's names from radios unless they're comedy obsessives, which Mark turned out to be. He had a very full set of recordings of classic radio comedies going back to Round the Horn and other ancient programs. So we shared that interest. And Mark had an interest in improvisation as well, although his interest at that time was more in musical improvisation. He had a jazz orchestra that made some quite extraordinary albums and concerts. And the principles of jazz improvisation, theatrical improvisation, and indeed applied improvisation are all much the same. And if I tell you one of the main principles of improvisation, which is obvious when you think about it, it's make use of what's there. You use the resources around you to respond and adapt to whatever is there in the moment that you need to respond and adapt to. And that's quite clearly a core idea of solution focus as well, is that we're using the resources available to us to make progress in some direction. So there's a huge consistency and overlap between these two worlds, the world of improvisation and the world of solutions focus. So that affinity for me was apparent immediately, and each of them has informed the other since.
Fascinating. So can I come in again? So using what's there, and I've found, Paul, I've created a couple of exercises since one's been using Zoom, and you're sort of getting into people's surroundings, and you might know that I've got this interest in extended cognition.
I do.
From some philosophy that I've studied, and it's extended cognition, meaning that aspects of our environment can become part of our cognitive processes. And because with Zoom, for many people like yourself, Paul, you get a little window into their environment. And I'm guessing I'm not the only person who's seeing you at the moment and looking at the stuff behind you, stuff stuck on the wall and the poster. And so it's too small to see what it is. But could you just, are there any particular aspects of those posters that you want to draw attention to that says something about you that you'd like to share? I'm curious about your surroundings.
Well, let me get to that. First, I do share an interest in philosophy. That was my subject at university. And in particular, the Wittgensteinian strand that appears in solution focus has been a constant source of interest. And the extended cognition and embodiment as well as another strand of practice that seems to have a lot of overlap with the things that we do. That's perhaps a bit neglected in solution focus practice, which has been conceived very much as conversational and therapeutic conversational at that. But there seems to be no reason why it can't extend to the body and the environment and the interactions that happen in real physical space. And then we come to this bizarre Zoom land or StreamYard that we're on now. And one of my colleagues in the improvisation world calls it flatland, two-dimensional space. And in order to create connection, you need to go beyond that two-dimensional space. And a way of doing that is to take an interest in what's behind it, what's in the room, which is where I come back to your question. I've got all sorts of things here. Quite a lot of them are letters or photographs on the wall from journalistic times. So I've got a picture of Frankie Howard, who was one of my comedy heroes when I was growing up. If anyone remembers Up Pompeii, it hasn't stood the test of time, but I used to find it amazing if we were allowed to stay up and watch that. And I got to interview him when I was a journalist, so that was a fun memory. You can see the Frankie Howard picture. It's the little white square one near the flip chart. There's pictures of 2 children just above it, who are 2 of my children. I have 3 of them, so they all feature somewhere on these walls. There's books. I've got a house full of books. What else? Flip chart.
Yeah.
Not much used anymore, but used to be an important tool for training and facilitating face-to-face in real rooms with real people. I've got a fly lying in front of the screen there. That's not a regular.
An interloper. Yeah. So
I'm so glad I was muted then, because his hyena laugh just came out when you said that.
So you had this kind of connection with Mark in terms of improv and the jazz, and then what was the next step in this journey? Where did you take the solution-focused approach from there?
Well, we were doing a lot of work together in organizations as trainers and consultants, and increasingly using solution focus as a set of ideas and tools like the Quest and work that followed on from that. And we got a contract to do coaching training in Walker's Snack Foods, where we came up with the Oscar model for them that's been popularized since. And I'd written 2 books up to that point on training, both about improvisation. And Mark and I decided we would co-write a book about solutions focus, which we called The Solutions Focus. And we took it to a publisher, Nicholas Brearley, who said, it's an interesting idea, but there's really not enough. You haven't done enough with it to plant a flagship about solutions in organizations. So not yet. And then we went back about a year later with more case studies that we'd put together by then. And he said, right, let's go for it. And let's make this the flagship book about using SF in organizations. And at the same time, the Bristol Solutions Group, we organized the first Soul World conference. And we've been going to conferences like EBTA and UKSFP. And the therapists very kindly let us hang out with them. Neither of us were therapists or counsellors. Jenny had done some counselling, so we had a slight link in there. And we created great relationships with the people within that therapeutic counselling world. But we wanted to see what we could do with solution focus in organizations specifically, management, teams, culture change, leadership, and these sorts of topics that interested us. So we set up Soul World to see if anyone else would come to such a thing. And they did. About 80 people came to the first conference in, I would say, about 2002, 2001. And then more came the next year, also in Bristol. And at the second conference, we launched the book. Nick Brearley bought some champagne, which everyone got a glass of, and we signed copies of the book, which were part of the conference entrance fee, if I remember rightly. And that we found that we weren't the only ones who'd had that idea. There were people like Peter Jarboe, Peter Rurig, and others who were already making the connection through therapy to coaching to organizations, or using it with clients to find that they could use it with their own colleagues and with their own teams. So it was an obvious extension of some of the practices and some of the ideas. And we developed that in Soul World, which has been going ever since. And after about 4 or 5 years of Soul World, we invited Insu Kim Berg to be a guest presenter and a keynote speaker, do some workshops. So the therapeutic connection was remade with the founders and originators, and it became more of a world community again.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that the whole solution-focused approach, as you know, from the therapy world, sort of transferred across into work with organisations, or were there certain aspects of solution-focused brief therapy that were, you know, more applicable or more useful than others, or was it just the whole thing that you could use?
It's a great question, because the answer is yes, but maybe not in the way that people would immediately think. So for me, all of the principles transfer absolutely directly and smoothly across. And we outlined in our book 6 principles, SIMPLE, to make up the acronym SIMPLE. And we could go into 1 or 2 of those if you want, but solutions, not problems, was the first of those. So very recognizable to anyone that's solution focused in therapy. But what I think doesn't go across directly, and that needs to be in some way detached from the thinking about SF, is the idea that it's always, or even at core, a one-to-one conversation with one person being the therapist or the expert and the other person being the client. You can do solution focus, for example, as a team where nobody's in charge. You do it collectively and collaboratively, and it's not about asking questions of each other. So suddenly it's put in a completely different context, but yet can be completely recognizable as solution focused. People are talking about what they want. They're doing things in order to get closer to what they want. They're using their resources and so forth. And not doing a lot of other things that are problem focused. Does that make sense?
Does, yeah. So in therapy, we ask questions, and we sort of, I can hear myself saying it's the client's answers, which is where the therapeutic ingredient lies. It's not our questions; it's the answer. The questions are simply to enable the client to answer. So in some contexts, you've managed to do away with the questions and go straight to the answers stage.
Certainly, in theory, you can do away with the questions and say, let's get together and create what we call a future perfect, or could be called a preferred future, as a team of what we want to do as a team. So there's an implicit question of what you want to do as a team, but you don't spend much time asking that. You do all the work on co-creating the preferred future or the future perfect or the vision. And you might do that in pictures. I do storyboard activities or newspaper front page activities where the desired future is created pictorially and in headlines. And a lot of the value in that, which is sort of therapeutic, but it's never called that, is the conversations that people have in order to create these outputs. I've never thought of that before as being the therapeutic part, but that would be the analogy to the therapy part of the therapeutic conversation.
So are there any companies or things that stood out for you that are still sort of where you can look back on and think that was a special moment or a special outcome for this company?
Well, many, yes. So let's take the Walker's one, Walker's Snack Foods. They brought us in, not because they knew anything about solution focus. And we were a very, very small agency competing with much bigger training companies to do the coaching program. And we were selected, we later learned, because we said we didn't know exactly what we would do when we went in, but we would develop the program with them as we went along. This was based on the idea of the client knowing much more about their world than we would know, and we'd find out as we went along. And they liked that, and so they picked us to do it. And they had a program in the first place because they were losing staff, mainly because people who were leaving felt they were badly managed by their direct line manager. So people weren't leaving the organization, they were leaving their manager. And they hoped that coaching, more conversational coaching approach, would turn that around. And it was a really good program because the senior executive team did it first. And Mark and I and other people we work with coached the senior team. And then the senior team opened up their diaries to coach whoever would come along to their sessions. And we taught coaching skills, solution-focused coaching skills, with the Oscar model to all the managers. And over a year, they did another internal survey, the staff survey, and found all of the indicators they were looking at had improved quite significantly. Fewer people were leaving, people were getting on better with their managers. And it showed you could make a real shift in a culture. As with my other writing partner, Janine Waldman, we say we're changing the culture one conversation at a time. That's a very small step approach within a bigger, ambitious picture. It just is so effective. We did a lot of work with Reading Borough Council, and the joy of that was that, as well as working with council officials, they liked it so much they offered sessions to people in the community who were organising local groups that were trying to get traffic improvements, or do sessions in community centres. And we worked with these community group leaders, and they did most wonderful projects using very simple SF ideas. Got some lovely video records of those things.
And can I ask you about another example, Paul, or for you to talk about another example that I think might be in the second edition of the Solutions Focus? It's something you told me about, because you've been interested in the Solution Focus Collective.
Yes.
And I think, the Solution Focus Collective, a group of solution focused people, practitioners who are interested in, the use of solution focused ideas and practices for social change. And so we talk about social change and not just for individual change. And of course, your work, the people you've been mentioning, has partly shown the way to that. And I think gives us some, I don't know if legitimacy is the right word, but of course the approach can go beyond individual change, because it already has when it's been used in group work, but it's been used with organisations, as you've been outlining. And you told me about an example that is perhaps slightly different, because it's about campaigning.
Yes.
And that's the Coombe Down salt mines.
The Coombe Down stone mines.
Stone mines.
Salt mines.
Okay.
Close.
Yeah, I'm only improvising here. So, talk about the Coombe Down stone mines campaign.
Yeah.
How it was solution focused.
Yeah. Well, it brings together journalism. There was a lot of media work in it, which was one of my backgrounds. Politics, which was the other subject that I took at university, very political thing that happened, and solution focus. When I left Manchester, as I mentioned before, we moved to Coombe Down, a village just outside Bath. And about 6 weeks after we moved in, we got a leaflet through the door from the council saying we're going to fill in the stone mines under the village, including under your house. These were stone mines that we'd never heard of.
Quite worrying to be
Quite
told.
worrying. The surveyors had not picked this up.
Yeah.
And there's going to be an enormous project run by the local authority, Bath and North East Somerset, to fill in the stone mines. And they were going to use waste from coal-fired power stations, a material called PFA. And there was a letter in the Bath Chronicle, our local paper, that said, I don't know if anyone realises, but this is going to mean 20 lorries coming and going every day for a year and a half. And it's not going to work anyway, because if they put this stuff in, it's going to fly out the ends of the plateau that we're in and break out of the bounds that it's supposed to be set within. We thought, that doesn't sound very good. So we had a meeting with this guy who wrote the letter, me and my wife, and I said, well, let's do something about it. So we set up the stone mines, the Coombe Down Stone Mines Association, had an initial meeting in the scout hut on the field in the village, which had more than 100 people, full scout hut meeting. People got really agitated when they heard what this was about. The Conservative councillors, if you want to get political, said, no, trust the experts, it'll all be fine. And our Lib Dem councillor said, no, we're going to ask questions. And to cut a very long story short, and I'm talking about 10 years, so it was a very... You asked about what I have in my room. You see these papers there? That is the Coombe Down Stone Mines archive, which I've just started to sort through some years later. And so the solution focus bit was how we conceived the campaign, at least how I conceived it. And I was the chairman of the association for many years. So I had a lot of influence in how it was conceived and run. We said, rather than keep going and asking, what's the problem with the mines? How did they get to be this way? We said, how would we like this village to be? given that we've got these mines here in the state that they're in, how can we make use of them? What would we like to see? And the answer to that, and it was an incredible fight to get to the council funding this, but they did eventually, was a stabilization of the mines done in an environmentally sensitive way that wouldn't kill protected bats under European habitat directives, that the villagers would be able to live with while the works were going on. They used the whole of the village green as the works went underground. They brought in miners from Wales who were no longer employed in the Welsh mines but could work in the stone mines here. I don't know if they've got salt mines in Wales. They were coal mines, weren't they? And to restore the village, including this village green, to the way it was before or better, with some heritage and archaeological finds preserved. And that's what they did. That's how it is now, rather than destroying a village in the various ways that would have been possible if they just ploughed ahead with the original scheme.
So a very successful campaign, really.
Very successful, very political, very community-based. And when we had that first conversation about how is SF used in communities and so forth, that was one example. There were examples of peace building that Anton Stellemans had worked with from years before. So people had seen these possibilities. And solution focus in organizations is often compared with appreciative inquiry. And appreciative inquirers were, and still are, David Cooper-Ryder and colleagues at Case Western University. They would ask questions about what was the dream of a community and how might they accomplish that. And they would do resource-based interviews with elderly people about what they valued about their lives or about their communities. So there was a whole project called Imagine Chicago that on some scale looked at that as a community in an appreciative manner. And I think appreciative inquiry differs from SF in some of the language it uses and some of the concepts it's got, but it's certainly a cousin and has some affinities with it.
Why is I mean, because we've spoken to people all over the world and all using this approach in such different and wonderful ways. Why is it so transferable?
That's also a very interesting question. It is when people get it, but most people don't get it. So it's still a minority sport and probably will be for a long time. We're a very problem-saturated world, problem-saturated media. There's not just a problem-saturated tradition, but a very mechanical way of looking at the world, engineering-based rather than holistic, interactional, improvisational, and complex way. And not everyone gets that. But there are enough people who do get it for us to say it does spread and there are people that get these ideas. So when we're teaching groups, you see some people just go, oh yeah, of course, makes complete sense. And they're up and running with it. And they can, when you're up and running with it, you can accomplish things very quickly. But there are people who want to argue about it for a long time, who want to rigorously test it. I wanted to very rigorously test it when I was introduced to it, because it did sound both too simple and too good to be true. But it's not. I mean, as we all know, and sometimes manage to convey to other people, it's a very powerful and very amenable set of tools. It's pleasant to use. But there's a huge number of, we could say, vested interests against that, ways of seeing the world, and benefits from problem focus that are going to stop and continue to stop it spreading as much as it might. And it might be that while it's got a good footing in therapy and counselling, although still a minority even there, it could be that it takes an organisational or a political social strand to really bring it to attention where people say, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense, let's do something.
So do you think there are a sort of a problem-focused world and a solution-focused world, and they're quite separate, and that us in the solution-focused world should try and get the other problem-focused world to do what we do? Or is it a bit more intermingled than that, would you say?
there's a Wittgensteinian answer that the world of the happy is not the same as the world of the unhappy.
Yeah.
But if you shift that perspective, you are actually living in a different world to all intents and purposes. But yes, I think things are very rarely either or.
Yeah.
They're usually on some sort of a scale.
Mm-hmm.
But there are possibilities between extremes, and maybe there are. Well, you get a lot of people that encounter SF and say, "Oh, can I use it with?" And they fill in the gap with the thing that they've already done. And of course, they can use it with that, but to a purist like myself, they're not really SF. They're borrowing a bit, or trying a bit, or diluting it. And because I think it's a comprehensive approach, I take that more purist position of saying, well, if that is correct, why not use it? Because then you're not muddying the waters with these other things. And at the same time, people bring all sorts of life experiences and ways of thinking and resource to using something. So it's not saying leave it all behind, but it is saying reinterpret it, use it maybe differently. When I went on the brief therapy course with Harvey, that first course that I went on, there were psychiatrists there who'd done 6 or more years of medical training. And one of them said, well, this means I've got to throw away everything I've learned for 6 years. That's a bit of a big step. But we said, no, you don't. You keep all of the experience that you've had, but you might reapply it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess maybe sometimes the solution is too unpalatable. Do you know what I mean? If I fix this, I have to give up something else.
Maybe. I'm not sure how that would particularly happen, because one of the attractions of it seems to be that people are asked what they want and are very free to describe what they want. So there's no reason for that to be unpalatable. It should be an attractive thing and a motivating thing. When an organizational team, for example, describe how well they'll be working together, they invariably say, well, that sounds good. Well, let's do that. Or why don't we do that? And we reorient that to when do you do that, or how might you do more of that? But the idea of what they want to do together is collective ambition or aspiration, and is intended to be something that you want. When I'm working one-to-one as a coach and people tell me what they want, I'll often ask if that is something that they really do want. Check out. It's not just a quick flight of fancy, but it's meaningful and significant to them. Occasionally that gives them pause to think really hard about whether there are benefits in that to them, the difference that it would make to them, and whether that is something that they want to pursue.
Yeah. So I can just push back at that a little bit, Paul, just as I'm thinking it through what you just said. So you said sometimes when you're coaching, when people tell you what they want, you ask them if that's what they really want. And then
not in those words.
Okay. Wouldn't you have to ask them, but is that what you really want? You could ask that question forever then, couldn't you? Until you
Yes, I don't ask it like that. I do ask what difference it would make.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of a recent example, and I can't remember what I asked to get to the answer. It was something about this client wanted to learn a new language because it was a language that was in his family. And I think I just did a scaling question and said, oh, yes. So he said he was going to do this and that he wanted to do it for this or that reason. And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is you are absolutely going to do this, you're going to start learning this language. And 1 is, well, it's just an idea. I thought I'd say it. Where are you on the scale? And he stopped and he started crying because he had realized the significance of wanting to do it and what it would take for him to do it. That there was a real commitment in there if he was going to take that route. and that it had that meaning for him. So that's what I mean by asking if they really want to do it. I'm not asking in those words. We're just making sure the conversation has a completeness to it and a significance to the person who's saying the things that they're saying. I'm giving them the space to take themselves seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose what I was thinking was that, for example, I don't know, young mental health at the moment. It's a massive topic, and we've got like a year's waiting list, perhaps. And if the people in charge were to believe that somebody who hasn't been to university for 5 years and studied the mind in such detail can start to show results, it kind of undermines my position somewhat. Do you see what I mean? So it's a bit like the old climate change argument, isn't it? There were people that sit there until they're blue in the face and say it's not happening. Because if it is happening, I'm going to have to make changes to my lifestyle that I don't particularly want to.
Yeah. There's a lot of professional prestige invested in certain ways of doing things. I don't have that because I'm not from that background or route. So if I saw something that was, let's say, an effective therapy, I would go for it. And when I worked with Guy and others on solution focused accreditation for UKSFP. And from the outset, that was not about how long had you studied or what had you studied. It was, can you run an effective session? Like a driving test, can you drive?
Yeah, it would help if you could drive a bit. Yeah.
Just to get into a bit of fine detail, Paul, you mentioned that Insu Kimberg came to the Soul World Conference. Was it 2007-ish, 8-ish, or a few years after you got going? And so there was a sort of re-meeting of the sort of therapy and organisation. And then you just said a few minutes ago that you used a scale with your coaching client from 1 to 10. And so I wondered if it had been Steve DeShazer who'd come to your Soul World Conference a few years later, whether you would have used 0 to 10, because I think famously Steve used 0 to 10 and Insu used 1 to 10. And I don't think they taught work outside of work, so because they were a married couple. So they perhaps never argued about it. I don't know. And can you comment on that? There's been a little bit of discussion on one of the internet discussion lists recently. Yeah, and the often is about 0 to 10 or 1 to 10. And some people will think, well, how does that possibly matter? But I think it's worth talking about. People think about this sort of thing. So 1 to 10, is that your standard scale?
Yeah, it is. I met Steve and Insu for the first time, I think. No, maybe the first time was at an EBS conference. But then there was a really interesting conference in Vienna on systemic things, systemic therapy, but systemic world and complexity. And Peter Senge was there and all sorts of interesting people. And Steve and Insu were there.
Peter who, Paul?
Senge wrote the 5th Discipline, a business book. Umberto Maturana was there, who does things about holistic systems in nature and biology. So I was hanging out with these rather extraordinary people in this very spaceship-like conference center. And I was walking along one of these long corridors that they had in the center, and I saw Steve DeShazer coming at me from the other direction. So it was about a 200-yard approach. So we were going to bump into each other. And I'm sure he had no idea who I was. I said, "Hello, Steve." He said, "Do you know where Insu is?" I said, "No." And we crossed and walked.
Have you read The Meaning of Life, Paul? I bet you have, by John Lloyd and somebody. And so there's something called, I think it's Corrie Vorry. There's a whole section of words about that sensation when you're approaching somebody in the corridor and you have to pretend you've not seen them for some time, because you can't smile too soon. Otherwise, what do you do when you're approaching and you've smiled too soon?
Well, it was very difficult to get a smile out of Steve at any time. So this was always going to be a treacherous encounter. So on a scale from 1 to 10, I don't have strong views on it, but in a group setting or even one-to-one coaching, I will often ask people for a scale of 1 to 10, and we'll say you're already at 1 because we've got the topic on the table, we've opened it up, it's under discussion, so we're already some way towards working on it. So I'll give you 1.
Yeah, I've just realised, Paul, that I've already challenged that because we had that discussion on that list that I just mentioned earlier. I didn't raise it for that reason, I promise.
Okay, I appreciate the more mathematically inclined and the importance of 0.
It wasn't so much mathematics, but my take on that was that was your idea of progress that had put it on 1 on the scale. That you were saying to them, you've made some progress already, and that makes it a 1. And so rather than asking them, so it sounded like a 0 to 10 scale, really, but you were putting them on 1
There's never been.
I hadn't asked that question because I could come back at that point that I'd already made you on an email.
Yeah, there's never been any reluctance of people to then engage with it on the grounds that I've done some of the work for them or told them where they are. But I could see that as a philosophical objection, overridden by the practical bonhomie that is created by saying it.
I mean, I think me and Aisha are 1 to 10 people when we use the scale, and I mean, 1 still means what 0 means. It's the complete opposite. It's just that it felt like, at least, like Paul was saying, on a 1, we've started this discussion. So I'm not saying there's been movement, but I don't know. It just felt. It just felt the right way to do it for us, and I don't know why. Even when I'm with clients and I ask the best hopes, it never seems to come out the right way or the same way every time.
Yeah, I
You
don't
just get
feel routine of coaching like 8 times a day or whatever it is that a full-on coach would do to get into enough of a rhythm for that. So I'm sure I've asked a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is everything you've said is there, and 0 is none of it or the complete opposite. I'm thinking particularly that I use the 1 in group settings. I don't claim to be consistent.
Yeah, I'm definitely a 1 to 10 girl. So the first time I actually really got to see who you are, Paul, is at SF24. And I did say at the beginning, before we went live, that we wouldn't talk about it too much, but we want to talk about it a little bit. So can you just explain what SF24 was or is, and what your role was in it?
Yeah, it was and is. I had a call from Steve Flatt on behalf of the UK SFP committee that they were thinking of doing something virtually, given that it was so hard to meet. Did I have any ideas? And we created a one-off event to start with that had a couple of provocative speakers for a few minutes, and then asked people to go into groups to talk about it was either their best hopes or how they were coping with the crisis, the pandemic crisis. And that went really well. And we thought we could do that again, but involve more people. So we came up with the idea of a 24-hour global virtual conference, and to make it as inclusive and inviting as possible for as many people to join in with. So this was using solution-focused and improvisational principles and ideas to co-create an event. And it ended up, it was a few months ago, can't remember exactly when, with well over 100 presentations in every region of the world. There were 4 different time sectors, each had 6 hours to host and lead it. People picked up and passed on the baton. They attended across continents to each other's sessions. We managed to get them recorded, and there's now a wonderful YouTube resource of about 30 to 40 of those sessions. We had panels with really interesting speakers, people offering sessions, all for free. So the feedback showed it was very successful, very popular, and that people wanted more of it. So it's now going to happen again next year, and we've got a date for that, which again I can't remember, but website, SF24 website, and a Facebook page. And in between times, we're going to have some watch parties where we'll present a short extract from one of the recorded sessions. People will watch it together virtually and then discuss what was the content of that session and what it means to them now. And they're going to be on the first Thursday of each month starting in December. So that's December the 3rd at 4 o'clock UK time. Be the first one of those. And that will keep the pot boiling or the interest alive while we gear up towards next year's SF24-21.
Wow.
So I guess it's part of a response to a response to the situation we found ourselves in with the pandemic, and so with the plans for it to happen again next year, and who knows where we'll be up to with the pandemic and etc. I'm thinking about some things will never be the same again, and some things will do that. It's not sort of looking on the bright side, I don't think, but you'll find that some responses to a terrible situation are like that was a good thing to do, and that good thing maybe doesn't depend on that terrible situation. You can sit and have a watch party to watch a video, on video, a presentation that was made. What a great idea! I guess this is sort of leading me into. I was going to ask you, Paul, about how you're getting through lockdown, or tips for getting through lockdown, or what. But that's the question now in my head is what else might we take from this or continue doing next year, the year after, and ever afterwards? Questions.
But change is happening all the time, and our task is to identify useful change and amplify it. I think we attribute that to Gregory Bateson, but nobody can now find where he actually said it. But change is happening all the time. So there was this huge change in the world that was very obvious to everyone because it affected everyone. We had to stay inside, and all sorts of other things were blatantly clear that there was change, whereas previously people might not have accepted that things were changing all the time because more things seemed the same than different. But here was a really impactful example of change happening, and everyone had to respond to it and were aware to some extent of their responses, both individually, in families, in organizations. Work changed for almost everyone, and politically there's been upheaval, hasn't there, in so many countries through it. And one of the responses to that was, what do we do virtually as an SF community? And we discovered that there was an SF community that was willing to bring itself together worldwide. And that hasn't happened before, because when your focus is on face-to-face conferences, they're really limited to people who've got the time, the budget, the inclination to do all things involved with attending a conference for a number of days. And that's not readily open to everybody. When you go virtually, geography doesn't matter. Yes, you still do need an internet connection, so it's not open to absolutely everyone, but it's far more widely accessible than it was. You can reach a much more diverse group of people, which is what SF24 did. And of course, that's a good thing in and of itself, irrespective of what it was that prompted us to invent the thing. So it makes complete sense to do that again. And there will be hybrid events, new events, and old events. So there will still be conferences, I'm sure, and people gathering for a reason, but they may think a lot more carefully about what's the value of that, how do we make the most of that for the investment that it requires. And at the same time, if we're developing interesting new formats that spread the word and build the community and get people engaged in different ways, then absolutely we should do that.
For me, probably for Aisha, it gave the fact that you said everyone gave up their time for free, and everyone in this SF community has been so giving to us, to Muppets coming along and saying, can we interview you? And everyone's saying, Yeah, sure. So I'm 100%. It's a wonderful community to belong to. But I would, like you're saying, I would never be able to hear these people speak if I had to travel to Vegas or, Australia or New Zealand. And so we've made, hopefully, lifelong connections with some fantastic people, which we would never have done before. And also what was lovely was a lot in the breakout rooms, a lot of the conversations that we were having, there were people from the non-SF world coming along to see what was happening, which was really lovely to see. And like you said, just going from one continent to the other, it was amazing. Absolutely.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to say that Dominic Goddard and Elfie Cherny had done some quite different but important preparatory work by doing the Simply Focused podcast, which also had something of those qualities of connecting the people who've got something to say about SF and sharing it with people who are either already knowing about SF or have come to find out something about it. And SF24 I hope will do both those things of being a place where the community shares and develops ideas, and also reach out beyond the existing community to others who might be interested. And as you say, you just wouldn't get those people in one place together. It would not be possible. But you can do that online. And yes, there are some things you lose by being online, of course, but there are also things you gain.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned hybrid a few minutes ago, Paul, and mentioning Dominic and Elfie made me think that they've done sort of a very special thing in lots of ways, but in the driving around North America and then in their van, in their
camper van.
RV, and making the podcast. I haven't really connected that because that's a hybrid effort.
Yes.
And the driving around in the recreational vehicle, it was an important aspect of that.
It was.
Yeah, it draws attention in all sorts of ways to what they were doing, and then but the podcast's on the way. You wouldn't have known about the RV otherwise.
They were living SF in all sorts of ways and communicating it. And go back to when I was a journalist, you're witnessing and seeing things that are topical events or whatever, but you also have to communicate them to people who haven't been there, who haven't seen them. I'm not making any deep or profound point there, but thinking that partly getting the word out is important, and that there are lots of ways of doing that. And Simply Focus and SF24 and what you're doing here are all quite new ways of doing that. It's not a lecture tour, it's not a training course, it's not mentoring people one-to-one, all of which are wonderful and will continue as well. It's new ways of doing it in addition to those, writing books.
Yeah. Can I take you back to politics, Paul? And I just not really watching the news an awful lot. I haven't been doing for some time, but I watched it earlier. And of course, we've got an enormous election coming up in the States with Trump and Biden. And then I was watching. We've got here in the UK, got Boris Johnson, and I watched on Prime Minister's Question Time earlier, talking, across at Keir Starmer. I don't trying to put the question together, but whether you could conceive of a solution-focused Parliament or a solution-focused White House, or tips to give to Boris Johnson over here, and whoever wins the election in the state. So how does stuff apply to politics at that level? I mean, Coon Down was a local campaign.
Well, Coon Down was local, regional, and European.
Yeah.
So it went international. But yes, it was essentially a local campaign. I think it's very difficult because politicians can. It's very difficult for a politician to say that they were wrong and change their mind in any kind of public way. And they are part of an ecosystem with the media that is very critical, and with electronic media is extremely polarizing, as we all have all discovered. And in my view, is we've entered a new type of politics with social media that is a step change from how it was before, and how it was before wasn't so great. So from here, I don't see that you could easily take a couple of steps to a solution-focused president or solution-focused parliament or solution-focused politics. But you can envisage some solution-focused media asking more solution-focused questions. You could envisage podcasts, which are now more popular than ever before and that are accessible for anyone to make and for anyone to listen to, asking or having more solution-focused conversations with people who are currently in politics or who might go into politics. That solution focus will continue to spread in this step-by-step way by influencing people. Whether there will be big breakthroughs along the way, radical step changes and paradigm shifts remains to be seen.
Well, Gil Green's going to be running for presidency in the next term, and he's going to make me chief of staff or staff. I'll be chief of staff. So watch this space.
So that's the first Facebook. Is that a Facebook comment from Gil? It's very difficult to stay solution focused here in the States with Trump as president. So it obviously lends itself to the question: so how are you managing it? How do you do it?
And only a couple of weeks to go.
Yeah.
So Paul, what are your plans or future projects? What are your best hopes?
Still very involved with SF24 for 21 and would like to see that established on the calendar and more people attracted to it within the community and beyond. My organisation, you've got my Impro website there, which is my improvisational work, and there's the solutionsfocus.co.uk, where I, in partnership with Janine Waldman, and we're doing solution-focused work with organisations, including universities, businesses, and coaching individual people. And I would like to continue that use of time both in my own private work and in working with the community. There is a generous and sharing community, and it's always refreshing and exciting to be part of that. Guy and I both in the London SF group, which has been going for about 10 years, monthly meetings of people, now virtual, but previously in real life. And that creates longer lasting bonds and friendship and people you can go to for really thought-provoking conversations that continue to advance the practice. I felt like I was watching a bit there, but
no, it's good. But I'm going to ask you
about the future.
I'm going to ask you the most important question of the evening. So, what's it like to be a solution-focused dad?
Well, in my courses, I usually tell a story in which the punchline is my children saying, "Don't try that stuff on us, Dad." But in reality, they are quite fond of it, and they like the respect that I aim to show them, and the space that I will give them, and the encouragement of their skills. They're all now young professionals, my three children, and they've all done the thing that they've really wanted to do. So you can see how they've got to those things. And my son changed profession from something that he maybe felt he was a little bit pushed into in some ways to the thing that he really did want to do, that he's now doing. And I've completely encouraged them. My daughter gave up being an actress and became a hair stylist and makeup artist for weddings. Again, as a joke, I said I was very distressed that she'd left such an unsecure profession as acting. She chose what she wanted to do, and I'm absolutely fine with that. And that's a solution focus in action in some way.
Yeah, no, I love it. And Gil's just commented, Paul, after the pandemic, I want to come to the UK to attend one of your improv trainings.
Great. Thanks. See you there.
Yeah, and so we were talking about, looking at videos and reviewing them and discussing them. And we have this fantastic date night with Gil once a month. where we watch videos of Insu or Steve or whoever, and we talk about it. And
that's probably where we stole the idea from.
yeah. It's probably that. But it's absolutely lovely to just spend, 2 to 3 hours just sitting there, just having a conversation. And obviously the time zone, so we meet about 7 p.m. And it's absolutely lovely. And he has so many videos.
Yeah, it's got a huge
huge library there, but it's brilliant. We've actually come to the end, and you guys have been absolutely amazing. Is there anything that we didn't ask, Paul, that you would have liked for us to have asked?
No.
No, just no. And any last questions or comments from the co-host and Paul?
Yeah, Paul, what does because your full name is Pau Z Jackson, what does Z stand for?
Oh,
good question.
I've never been asked that before.
No.
No, that's true. Yeah, what does it stand for?
What does it stand for?
Well done, Guy.
There's 100,000 people currently watching this, hanging on your.
Yeah, no, literally.
It could be this week's competition.
Yeah.
Prize for the correct answer.
Because I want listen on the time I won't sleep. Because that Z is actually really, really important in your name.
Yes.
Because it's not Paul Jackson, it's Pau Z Jackson.
Yeah. It was a stroke of luck. This is the true story. There was another Paul Jackson at the BBC who was also a comedy producer, and he'd been there before me. He'd been producing The Two Ronnies and Red Dwarf and all sorts of big famous programs, The Young Ones, and we couldn't have two Paul Jacksons at the BBC, so I added the Z, and that distinguished us for payroll and everything else, and when I got credit on the program. And I obviously kept it afterwards, so I got known by that professionally, and now it's incredibly useful as a distinguishing feature for books and blogs and everything else. I had absolutely no idea that it would work in that way when it arrived.
Because it's like your trademark, isn't it?
It's like a trademark, and
what does a Z? Why Z?
Well, it doesn't stand for anything. It is an initial, like Harry S. Truman. There was the S didn't stand for anything, but you can think of it as Zebedee if you remember the Magic Roundabout, or Zeus if you like your Greek gods.
Oh, let's go with Zeus.
Yeah.
Paul is very bouncy, so that's I think Zebedee fits well.
I kind of feel like I need to have Aisha Z Adil.
I recommend it.
It just sounded so terrible, didn't it? It's like I want to be Pau Z Jackson.
You do get used to it.
No,
but
you
do get asked every day what it stands for.
God, thanks, Guy. Because I would have kicked myself later for not asking that.
Yeah, I was expecting something like Zebediah or this that story is so much better.
Yeah, no, I like it. So, Gil, bless him. Thanks, Paul, Guy, and Aisha and Joe for a very enjoyable and informative conversation. And we'll be talking a lot more about SF24 on the 17th of November.
We will.
I think I'm making it up. 17th of November at 7 p.m. And who will be joining us, Paul? I know.
My co-conspirators in SF2421, Christina Mule and Steve Flatt. So Steve and I sort of did the first one, and Christina showed up and did the most amazing hard work in making it all happen and make sense and documenting it. So she's really the secret power behind it all.
Yeah. No, it was absolutely amazing, and Joe and I have a lot of respect for Guy, and a lot of respect for you, Pau Z Jackson. We can't just say Paul; it's just Pau Z Jackson. And thank you for joining us. And
Sorry, the food arrived, so I just had to answer the door.
Oh yes, dinner time.
Enjoy your dinner.
Yeah.
Well, come on, guys. We
idea.
work really late hours. Come
Yeah,
on.
Mm.
But yeah, you're both absolutely incredible, and we'd love to have you as co-host yourself, Paul, on one of the FBS chats. We do like to invite people back. Owen's just commented. Oh, lovely. I love Owen. Sorry, you haven't emailed back, Owen. I'm going to find time. Owen, I like to meet with Owen via Zoom and listen to his fantastic stories. Is the man is just brilliant. Only came in halfway through. Thoroughly enjoyable, Owen. We love Owen. So thank you very much. Can I just ask that you both just stay right there? Don't push any buttons. Don't press anything. And everyone else will see you Thursday at 12 o'clock, where we'll be talking domestic abuse with Pauline. So everyone else, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.